Welcome back, everyone, to the Athletics Check podcast. It's your hosts, Michael, as one of your hosts, and then we've got Tyler Atlassian Maps. Don't forget about him. Don't forget about the maps,
Don't forget
and
me.
don't forget him. And also, we've got Anthony Deneau, our local sports aficionado. And Anthony, I have a question for you.
Straight
This
out the gate.
podcast is about RPGs and about sports. And I'd like to know, Anthony, if you were going to play an RPG about a sport, which sport would you think would translate well to an RPG?
That's such a good question. Yeah, it really is. So I'm crossing football off first because I think so much is dependent. Like your position really gives you like only a few things that you do. So I think that football, like, if you're a cornerback, you cover wide receivers, you cover the pass game. If you're an offensive lineman, you block. There are variations of this in some ways. Are you better run versus pass block? Can you snap the ball? Are you a center? Are you good against fast defensive linemen and linebackers on the outside? There's things like that. But I think that the way that in the direction that basketball is going, where it used to be a point guard, shortest guy, maybe the fastest, best dribbler, passer, gets everybody involved. And your big guy was your center. He was, a tall dude who was strong, probably not too fast, but would get a lot of rebounds in these things. And who you guard was really like point guards guarded point guards, and centers guarded centers, and forwards and wings, and shooting guards and power forwards, point forwards, whatever. Now basketball, we've heard this term for the last number of years, really the Steph Curry era of the positionless basketball. Now he's not necessarily a huge part of the positionless thing, but he has helped change the game with the way that outside shooting has come in, and he's a huge part of that. But one of the other things that kind of has ushered in is more like his teammate Draymond Green, who has totally broken the mold of players that wouldn't have been in the NBA at one point. They would have been called a tweener, where they're between positions. You're not really sure what they are, and that made it hard. So like, if your position is only guarding the other team's player at the same position, you don't really fit into what we need to do on both ends of the court. And it was just a weird thing, but Draymond Green has kind of broken the mold size-wise and position for what he does, and being able to defensively guard any player or position of any size on the opponent. Whoa. So basketball has really become a positionless game where you see teams, the Denver Nuggets just won the championship. The guy who handles the ball and brings it up most for them is probably not their point guard. It's probably Nikola Jokic, who's almost 7 feet tall. Like their center is their best passer and ball handler. And their point guard is still good at those things, but he's also a great shooter. So maybe it's better for him to be away from the ball. And I guess the reason why I'm getting into all this is just because there's less players on a basketball team compared to baseball and football. I think how you would make a player or a team in an RPG would give you so much more creativity and just a broader canvas to paint your picture. So that's why I choose that.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. I think baseball would be kind of fun too. While yes, your position on defense does a lot. If you're a shortstop in the old days, you probably hit last. You were just on the team because you were good with your glove and throwing, but you weren't necessarily a good batter. We talked in our last episode about Miguel Tejada, the MVP player for the Oakland Athletics, in that Moneyball movie that doesn't really get mentioned. You see his jersey at some point in there, but he would hit third and be a great power hitter. So that we've also seen this in baseball where a leadoff hitter could be any position. Your fastest player might be your catcher these days. You have a Shohei Ohtani, who's a pitcher and one of the best hitters, the best power hitter as we speak in baseball today in 2023, July 30th. So
way to date the podcast.
He's a top 10. Oh, I'll date this podcast. No. Go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's a great way of like. I mean, I personally love this in D&D as well, of breaking the stereotypes or breaking the archetypes of like, yeah, you can have the Goliath that's like super big and strong and tough. That's right in the archetype. It makes sense. Put him in center. It's like you can
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
create that and have an accent point there. But if you break that, like Draymond Green, you could absolutely make something great out of like, yeah, you're a Goliath, but you're an intelligence based wizard, and you're just making it work and having the
Yeah.
versatility now instead. um I absolutely see the connection between two. I love breaking the archetypes,
Yeah. I think in a lot of ways, like the progression of D&D has moved towards stuff like that, because
Yeah,
in the earlier days of D&D, you do see like very I would almost say like very typified like kind of classes,
almost
like
typecast. Yeah,
yeah, almost typecast. And it's like, your dwarf was just a dwarf. He had his class, everything about him was dwarf.
yeah,
He really didn't do anything that would have been outside of the realm for dwarves. Like casting magic really wasn't a dwarf thing. They were more about like hand-to-hand combat. But then as you see going forward, you can have like, you know an archmage who is a dwarf. You can have uh characters doing all sorts of stuff that they can play to type, they can play out of type. And it's just up to the individual and what they like to do.
yeah.
I think what you mentioned there, Anthony, about I like the idea of basketball being a RPG, because when I think about like how like they're like 5v5 games typically, and like having a group of players that is 4 to 5 players is like a great size for an RPG. I'm thinking like
Yeah,
that
I thought the
translates
exact same
perfectly.
thing. You could
Yeah,
all like cover different areas of the field and get
yeah,
good balance. I thought the exact same thing with like, oh, it is 5 players. It kind of makes sense that if I'm making one individual character, I've got to cover 20% of what needs to be covered, right?
yeah, yeah.
I thought the
And
exact same.
and
That's a good choice.
baseball is also a good thing, because like the teams are a bit larger, but like you can really shine kind of like as a character on a team, and kind of figure out what your niche is going to be,
Hmm.
on that, and you can kind of that could also work too. Um, I would say an interesting one could also be wrestling might be an interesting RPG. And I actually have a wrestling RPG, so I know that has translated before, but it just reminded me that was one thing.
You have one.
I in fact do have a wrestling RPG, yes. Uh where you It's based actually in our last podcast we talked about Monster of the Week, which is an RPG game based on a system called Powered by the Apocalypse. And this wrestling RPG is also based on the same like framework of you have playbooks for your characters. That's like kind of what defines your character, is you have different move sets basically. Everyone has the same basic moves, and then you get advanced moves that are based on your playbook. So you can be like a heel, you can be like a luchador, you could be
Oh, so
all sorts of different things, and they have different moves
Mm.
based on the
I
playbook
love
that they
this.
get. Yeah, it's and it also Powered by the Apocalypse, incredible system, also used for the Avatar RPG, Avatar: The Last Airbender,
Mm.
or Avatar: Legend of Korra, anything in that universe, just not big blue people. Um,
Or tiny blue people.
or tiny blue people. Yeah. I mean, you could use it for that kind of avatar too. It's such a flexible system. There are so many different versions of
Yeah.
it, but it's interesting though that you mentioned that it would not translate as well to football, because there is a football, not necessarily RPG, it's more tactical sort of thing. You don't focus
Hmm.
more on the individuals as much, but Blood Bowl
Sure. Okay.
is a tabletop board game based on Warhammer
Oh,
Fantasy,
I was gonna say Warhammer. That yeah, controlling a team.
and you're controlling a team. So it's more like wargamery than
Yeah.
RPG. which is I think fair when you say that like it may not translate as well to an RPG, but it's interesting that Blood Bowl actually exists as a game, a tabletop game, and it's football,
Yeah.
but it's like fantasy football, you know, like I think they can cast spells and stuff while also like being on
Sportsman.
playing football. Yeah.
That's fun.
Okay.
I was gonna say, isn't wargaming, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't wargaming kind of where the idea for D&D kind of spun out?
Oh
and
yeah, 100%.
is that
D&D came about because of wargaming.
where they said, "Hey, look at all these battalions of armies fighting that other battalion, and you have their stats and all this stuff."
Do you
But
want the
then
whole story?
Someone
Yeah.
said, "Look at this individual character. I wonder what his story is." Right? Something along those lines.
I could give you the whole story if you want. If you guys are in there, it might take a little bit.
Elevator
As far
pitch.
as far elevator pitch, Gary Gygax, Dave Arneson, all those guys, they started as wargamers playing historical wargaming things, and then they adapted that campaign to be more longer form, and they started role playing as those characters in that historical setting. It was like Napoleonic era.
Mm.
And then they were like, we could probably do this with fantasy as well, because this is the thing that we are all into. And so that's kind of how it started, is they were role playing historical reenactment basically, and then they said we could do this but more, you know. But also the D&D system is based on chainmail, which was a tactical, you know, wargaming rule set that they just added role playing
Another
elements
system.
to.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I would love to see that. I would love to see or maybe play with you guys a sports related RPG game. I think that'd be
Yeah.
super fun. We can use actual rules from sports as well as actual rules from an RPG of like magic casting. That'd be a trick. That'd be something.
I love that idea. That also might be a good gateway for me
Yeah.
into D&D.
Let's do it. You want to do the wrestling one? I'll set that up.
Oh, I already am.
We'll get Matt
I'm getting
involved.
like goosebumps. I'm salivating about.
Yeah.
Yeah, start
wrestling RPG.
conceptualizing your characters, man.
Oh,
We can
that's
talk about the scope. The game itself also talks about like you can do like local wrestling events all the way up to like, you know, WWE SmackDown of style events, you know, like
Yeah.
talks about like the reach.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, make performance checks, you know, make strength-based checks to lift the chair and hit the guy with it, you know, whatever. That's what I know
Yeah.
about
Awesome.
wrestling.
Yeah.
I think in the game
Great
you-
interview.
yeah, the thing
Yeah.
is like you build heat. I think like you're building like momentum with your
With fans,
with your
basically.
fans, and then like
That's sick.
that kind of like affects the game somehow. Like if you fail to generate the wow factor, I think in the wrestling, it affects it somehow.
Yeah, because like they work sometimes with popularity, right? With the pro wrestlers saying like, "Hey, we know that like you've got a really good rapport, or you've got a really bad rapport, but also like you're like the evil guy in the wrestling or whatever, and so you're
Yeah.
gonna do this and bring out the illegal moves or whatever." That's what I know about it. But,
Yeah.
but
And
building
it
that
talks about
rapport could have
kayfabe and all that
positives,
stuff.
yeah, and negatives.
Awesome.
Yeah. That sounds
Awesome.
great, guys.
Like
Yeah,
and
hell yeah.
and for the game master side of thing, I think they talk about like booking shows where they talk about like, oh, okay, this is the narrative, this is the way the thing that this is going to go, you know, like this person's going to win, this person's not going to win. I don't know if that's pulling back kayfabe a little bit, but yeah, it's got everything. It's a really great book. I used it once in Ultraviolet Grasslands, actually.
Oh yeah, we were talking about that last time. Yeah.
How so? How would that work?
So in Ultraviolet Grasslands, they were going on their own adventure, but I wanted to bring them to an event called what did I call it? It was based on BattleBots.
Yeah.
I had an idea where I wanted to have them go and watch a sporting event that was robot battles. And I used the wrestling RPG as like a basis for like determining which of the robots would actually go up against each other. And I feel like you could also use that RPG and just say like, oh, everyone's a robot, now we're doing BattleBots, you know.
Right on.
Because personally that's one of my favorite things sports wise is BattleBots.
Yeah, you
It's
do
like
like tech and Gundams and giant mechs and things as well,
sure,
which
it's
could
all
work
sorts
great
of
in
different
RPG
things.
systems and their own laser swords and laser cannons in space. Why not? Do it
Why
all.
not? Why
Here
not?
at Athletics Check, we talk about all kinds of laser guns and swords
Yeah, sure.
and space battles. Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
What is
All right.
what is Z Bashu on our notes? What are you talking about
Oh,
there?
that was one of my plugs for the end of the show. I could talk about him a little bit now though, if we want to. I'll plug him at the end still. Ziba Shu is a YouTuber. He makes the animated spellbook series on YouTube, and his videos are really good. A lot of them are they take like a spell or something from D&D 5e, and then he animates kind of like how it would work and like explains the rules of it, and it's really entertaining information on how to play or how to use some of the spells. And he also kind of sometimes gives his own opinions on some of those spells, or like for
Is there
instance, he was
rulings?
talking about Goodberry at some point, and how how effective that was in a campaign that he had, and then also offers like some thoughts on how to run that spell. So I was just going to
Yeah,
plug him later in
that's
the
cool.
episode, but I love talking about Z.
Do love Goodberry. I do think it's a very clutch spell, a good addition.
Yeah,
Goodberry is a spell, Anthony, where you create 10 berries and they restore a hit point if you eat it. And so
yeah.
it's good for like bringing people back if they're like just need a hit point to stay conscious, or like you can save them for later so you don't have to cast them mid fight or whatever, because that takes your action to do
Are you,
so.
Anthony, are you familiar with Lembas bread from Lord of the Rings?
No, I'm not.
Lembas bread from Lord of the Rings, it's like elvish bread that they say if you take a single bite of it can sustain, like, be enough food for you for an entire day. And that's also one of the effects of Goodberry, is that if you eat one of these good berries, you are satiated. You don't need rations for an entire day as well. That's its other benefit,
And the
in
joke in
addition to
Lord
the
of the
healing.
Rings is that the two hobbits are like, how many pieces of bread did you have? He's like, I had 2 whole pieces of bread. And it's supposed to look like one little
Yeah.
bite is enough to fill you up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hobbits love to eat, apparently.
they are little eating machines. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what they do best, I think. In
yeah,
fact, in The Hobbit, like most of the time when Bilbo is like reminiscing about the Shire and wanting to go back home, it's always about tea and scones and breakfast and eating sausage and stuff.
yeah,
I wish that were me.
yeah. I think a lot of that is because J.R.R. Tolkien fought in the First World War, and I'm imagining, like, while he was at war, he was probably imagining just not being hungry, because I
Yikes.
remember like knowing that like the soldiers in that war were not fed good rations, and I'm sure when he thought fondly of England, he was thinking about just sipping tea quietly at
Mm,
home and eating breakfast. And it's sort of like I could imagine that being something he would
yeah, that's what I think about
feel dreamy about.
when I think about London as well. I just think about eating breakfast, drinking tea,
Yeah,
Fish and chips.
fish and
yeah,
chips,
beer.
some good beer.
Yeah,
You guys ever travel to Europe?
I would like to. I have not. Have you?
No.
None of
No.
us. 0 for 3.
0 for 3.
Oof.
We're
Have you guys left the
uncultured
country?
swine.
That's
I've
exactly
been to
right.
Canada. I have
Been to
been to
Canada.
Canada on a
Yeah.
number of times.
I've been to East Coast Canada. I
I've
went
been to
there.
West Coast Canada.
Nova Scotia? Were you in Nova Scotia? Who knows?
No, I don't know. I was too young. It was a family trip to New York, and I have family upstate New York. I have family upstate, and so we stopped in the I think for Canadian Independence Day or something like that. Saw some fireworks. Stayed overnight. Went right back to New York, Niagara Falls area. It was nice.
Nice. Okay.
It was a good time. Yeah,
Yeah,
back in the good old day.
yeah. But I had another question for you, Anthony. Um, well, I was talking to my roommate, and he was saying that fantasy football season is gearing up, and I want to know what the fantasy season is looking like right now, and how do you prepare for it? Do you play it? We've talked about fantasy, but I don't know. Remind us again, like what sort of stuff you do with that.
Sure. So when it comes to fantasy football, this has become the biggest one. I mean, people's grandmothers play fantasy football. I mean, it's everywhere that you can possibly think of. It's become the biggest. Baseball was the original fantasy sport, but football has definitely taken over. It's the easiest of the fantasy sports to do. It's once a week for around 14, 15, maybe 16 weeks, depending on how long you decide your season to be. It could be 18 if you really wanted to go that far, now that the NFL has added an extra game. But fantasy football is the biggest one because the NFL has become the biggest thing, and it basically owns Sundays in our country. And it's a huge deal. People have, now it's like, how many fantasy football teams do you have? You have your work league, plus you have your family league, then you got your one with your buddies, then some guy the
bar league
hoops with. Exactly. So it's just become such a huge deal over the last 15, 20 years. It's absolutely blown up. It's the biggest thing. It's one of the reasons why sports betting is available on our phones, and sports betting is now legal in most states. And there's that shift and everything, I think, is a huge part to do with fantasy football.
Because that would be like DraftKings and stuff, right?
Sure, like, DraftKings and FanDuel are really the top two when it comes to that, and in the betting world. So I used to have a bunch of leagues, and I just kind of got over it and sick of it, and I enjoyed doing. I feel like it's the biggest crapshoot too. I think my mom beat me like 3 times one season, and I'm like, you don't know more about football than me, But
that would kill it.
Anything can happen. You just never know. I think it's the biggest crapshoot. I prefer fantasy baseball and fantasy basketball. That's where if you really want to be good, you do have to pay attention every day. Where your team is playing in baseball 6 or 7 times a week, and in basketball, your team is playing 3 to 5 times a week. So you really have to pay attention. Whereas fantasy football, it's like you're all geared up to have everything ready by this time on Sunday, or if you have a Thursday night game on the occasion that those happen once a week between just 2 teams play on Thursday other than Thanksgiving. So those are only getting 1 game a week basically from that. But it still is a lot of fun, and if people invited me to do it, just me being new out here ish, that I would join or start a fantasy football league if it made sense. Excuse me. I got sick of it because I liked the other sports better. I liked the other fantasy styles better. It's more, like I said, it's more in depth, and it's every day. And then also I get sick of rooting against players playing against my favorite team.
Yeah.
So you have to decide at what point in the game, okay, I'm a Packers fan. They're up by this much. It's okay if my wide receiver on the other team scores a touchdown or 2 or something like that. I just have a hard time with that, and I'm able to put those things aside, and I root for my team first and my fantasy league second, but sometimes it like dampens the fun and impact of that. And I view myself as a fan first. And while of course it's still fun to beat your buddies in fantasy football and have the bragging rights and everything, like I want to see my team win, and that's like the most important thing for me.
It does give you more to root for, though, I would say, right? Because you're not just looking at your team.
Exactly. So that's another thing. So my favorite team will play 1 time a week in football. How do I get gained interest in all the other games? Oh, I've got this other player playing again playing later today. I've got the Sunday night game. I got the Monday night game. I got my defense and a kicker. All these little things make games so much more interesting. And then also watching the Monday night game, it's the last game of the week. Other than the first week of the season, there's only 1 Monday night game. So it's the last one of the week. So depending on what your score is from all of Sunday going into that Monday night game, maybe you're down by like 50 points, but you've got 2 players going and the other team has nobody. So then you become interested all of a sudden in this Jets Dolphins game that you
Which you
otherwise
normally wouldn't be,
give
right?
yeah, which would usually have no effect on anything. But so there is that, and that is a huge deal, as well as just your standard Vegas betting lines and things like that as well, which of course can get anybody interested in any game.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Anything that's on right now could be chosen. You did mention NFL added an extra game. What do you mean by that?
So in in terms of competitive balance, the NFL really has the best situation. You have 32 teams, so there's 2 conferences and 4 divisions in each conference. There's the North, the South, the East, and the West. And you have 4 teams in each. So just the way the schedule was balanced, you had 16 games. You play every team in your division twice. There's 6 games. You play one division fully from one conference, one full division from the other conference. So that's another 8 games plus the 6. That gives you about 14. Then you're going to play those last 2 games are the other 2 teams that are in your conference that finished in the same place as you in your division. So if the Packers finished first, they would play 2 other first place teams from the previous year.
Oh, wow.
So just 2 years ago, the NFL added a 17th game. So now there's no 500 records unless, of course, you have a tie. You could finish 8-8-1. But now it's teams ties are fairly rare.
Yeah, I've almost never seen them.
Yeah, and you can go years without them, but you can also go a year where you might see maybe 4 or 5. I would say is probably the most we've seen.
Because they typically go into overtime at that point, and then
you go to overtime.
Just needs to get a kick usually.
Yeah, which is one of the major issues with overtimes in football, but we can get into that when football season starts. I've got a lot to say about that.
Okay, all right.
But they add the 17th game, so now you'll also be playing a team from the other conference that finished in the same place in your conference. So if you finished last in your conference, 16th, you would play the team who finished 16th in the other conference for that 17th game.
Interesting.
So there's a really good balance that they have because it is 32 teams, two conferences, and then 4 divisions within those conferences. And adding a 17th game was a little bit weird, but they got rid of a preseason game, which was a big complaint for players. Like, we don't need to be playing all this preseason. A lot of the best players don't even play in preseason anyway.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's sometimes you'll see a player, maybe they played 5 snaps, or if you're a veteran player and maybe you're coming off an injury or something like that, they won't even play you. They just have you ready for the regular season. So instead of having 4 preseason games and 16 regular season games, they changed it to 3 preseason and 17 regular season games. So
okay, so that's not so bad.
Yep.
So what is the point of a preseason game?
So in preseason, in the regular NFL season, you have 53 players you can have on your roster. But over the summer and in preseason, you have around 70, 75 maybe, and you're kind of slowly getting rid of players and making sure and filtering out, like, it sucks for a lot of players. They're non-guaranteed contracts. A player could get hurt, his career could be over, and that team's just going to cut him and be done with it.
In a preseason game.
In a preseason game. Yeah, exactly.
Wow, yeah.
But also guys can make a lot of money that way and get themselves on a team and a chance to make even more money beyond that. So it's
like
really
if they do really well in preseason.
Yeah. Yep. So if you have like a position battle, you already know who your starters are, whatever. Maybe you want to find out who are those last few spots on the team going to be, or maybe you don't know who your kicker is, and you're working out a few different kickers to find out who's you only keep 1 kicker and 1 punter throughout a season, hopefully, unless there's an injury. But there's going to be a battle between those 2 players over the preseason games, and you can see, they're pretty close in practice, but this kicker played better in the preseason game or had a more clutch kick versus this guy, or this guy kicks for distance, but this one's much more accurate, or might be better suited to kick in bad weather, or if we kick in a dome, play in a dome on turf. Those things come into play of like your climate and your stadium and things like that.
Well, especially
how clutch they can be,
especially if you think about like, if you know the games that you're going to play for the season, you know which like venues you're going to be playing in, which stadiums
Yep.
you're going to be playing in. You can be like, this person does well in these environments, and then say like, okay, well, those are the ones we're going to probably play in. You may not keep them for like a Super Bowl game because you never know how the season's going to go, maybe, but like, so you don't know where that's going to take place all the time necessarily, because it's
Yeah.
just based on how the teams do over the course of the season, right? That's who goes
For
to
what
the
game?
Super Bowl. For the
Correct.
Super Bowl, yeah.
Yes, but the Super Bowl is predetermined location.
Oh, it is.
Yep,
Oh, so like
so the
they
Super
already
Bowl is
know.
always like yeah, it's usually a couple years in advance where you can say
Okay.
that it's going to be in. I mean, it's pretty much. There's only a few places that they do it. Like it's not. It was in Minnesota a few years ago, which was very weird and rare. They did it in New York outdoors. I think it worked out that weather wasn't too bad. But typically, it's going to be Los Angeles. It's going to be the Superdome in New Orleans has had a number of Super Bowls. Miami, Tampa Bay.
They had one in the Bay either coming up or not too long ago. I can't remember, Santa Clara or something like that.
Yep. That's where the 49ers stadium is now located. So, and then also having a newer stadium in a popular location with a good climate. The Dallas Stadium, that's huge. I think it's AT&T Stadium.
Do you think we'll see one in Las Vegas soon?
Oh, absolutely. That'll be it's probably, I wonder if it's already scheduled actually.
It's going to be hot desert all the time.
I mean, it's the destination.
It's gonna be sunny,
it's
at least.
Destination of sports, yeah.
Yeah.
With all the different teams, we've talked about it on the podcast before, but all the different sports teams that are moving towards there. You got the Golden Knights, the Raiders. I'm sure there's other ones that I'm not thinking of, but they're trying to
bring it all in.
They're trying to bring it all in. It's already like an entertainment like hub for like concerts and sport or concerts and other types of entertainment, obviously, gambling and all the traditional Las Vegas things, but then now they're trying to bring in a new crowd of people with the sports.
Michael, you hit the nail on the head. The Super Bowl will be in Las Vegas this year at the Raiders Stadium.
Not surprised, not at all surprised.
Stadium, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see it then. It should be cool.
And the thing is about if you're taking flights here domestically in the US, Las Vegas is usually a very cheap destination to go to flying wise.
Yep.
A little bit easier for us considering we border Nevada. But yeah,
not too bad. Yeah, probably 2 hours.
Yeah,
not so bad at all from
PDX. Not a long flight from our neck of the woods, but yeah.
I was in Vegas for the first time last October, and it was because of layovers, but we set it up so we had an 8-hour layover on the way to Wisconsin and on the way back.
Yeah.
So that was my first and only time actually in Vegas. I've driven through Reno for work previously, but that was my first time actually going to a casino and being in Vegas and all that jazz. So
that's cool. How was it?
Very fun. It was a fun time. I don't think I would want to be there more than, I think 2 days might be tops. Go see a show like Beatles, Cirque du Soleil, I think would be super cool. I'm good. I'm not typically a smoker, but one of my loopholes is when I'm traveling or when I'm in a casino. And so Las Vegas to me is great because I can smoke indoors. That's
right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I will do that as much as I can.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's I don't know. There's a lot of fun to be had there, but I think I got to limit it because of spending and chaos. Yeah.
We were just talking to a friend of ours the other day about going to Vegas and the fact that they still smoke indoors and how wild that idea is, kind of, that they allow that in casinos. But I mean,
what a great thing.
There's a trick to it too, because we went to a casino here in Oregon a couple years ago, and I'm really not into the smoking environment. So we went through and we're like, okay, it's a little much for me. So we went to the non-smoking half, and it's not even half of the building. It's like a room, and
Yeah.
it is like so boring in there.
I was gonna say it's the
Like,
most boring
nobody-
spot in the entire casino is the non-smoking. Yeah.
There's nobody playing cards. There was nobody at any of the tables. There's hardly anybody at the machines, and it was just like such a different vibe. I'm like, wow, they really make it so you have less fun on this side. I don't know.
That's wild. Yeah.
It's so true. It's
Just
obviously
reminds
true.
me of the early 90s, going into a
Mm.
restaurant where it was smoking or non-smoking. It
Yeah.
was like,
Good old
That's
days.
I don't know. I don't think it was. I don't smoke. I don't think smoking's good
People used to smoke
necessarily.
on planes and stuff too.
Yeah, but that
Everyone
was
smoked
I think
then.
that was
I'd
before
love someday. I
lifetime.
hope I could smoke a cigarette on a plane or helicopter, whatever.
And
We'll
I've
get
heard
there
that
one
was
day.
actually like better. Like the air quality is actually worse now on planes because they don't filter it as much because they don't need to. I've heard
Oh,
is something I've heard, but
That's
I don't know.
that's interesting.
Yeah,
interesting.
like the
enough,
air
yeah.
quality is worse, but you're also not breathing in secondhand smoke. So like
Long
maybe
darts.
it's maybe it's the same or better. I don't know.
Hmm. Hell if I know.
Yeah, I'm not a doctor.
I'm not a smoker.
I'm not a smoker really either. So
Grow up. Just kidding.
A
yeah,
smoke connoisseur over here. Yeah.
yeah, fair
Goes
enough.
to Vegas just to smoke inside.
Yeah,
I can go. Yeah, I know. I can go months without it, but I also I have my times. New Year's is another one of my loopholes. If it's New Year's Eve, oh, it's game on.
Go for it.
no holds
Sure.
barred.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, what would we like to talk about next? As far as do we want to switch? Oh, what we didn't talk about last time is we had in our notes to talk about Damian Lillard and the Pac-12. Do you want to elucidate a little bit on that, Anthony?
Yeah, let's hallucinate on that.
Yeah. I want to hallucinate on that.
Yeah.
For sure. Or elucidate or whatever it is Michael said.
Yeah.
Well, the Damian Lillard thing, of course, it's a national story, but bigger for us here in the Portland area.
Mhm.
But it goes along with what we talked about a little bit this episode and last episode about the issues with players' contracts and then also collective bargaining rights and players' rights. So Damian Lillard, superstar player, one of the best point guard. Like if it wasn't for Steph Curry, he would be considered the best offensive point guard and shooter basically of the last 10 years, possibly. Not great on defense, whatever. He's signed for another couple years to one of the biggest contracts in the NBA. And at the time that he signed it, it probably was the richest contract for an NBA player.
Interesting.
And he's been extremely loyal to Portland, the Trailblazers, Oregon, the area. He's moved a lot of his family up here from Oakland and other places. And it just come to the point where they haven't done enough, and he's later in his career now, where he feels like he can win a championship with them, and he's done everything he can, and he has been one of the most loyal players we have in the NBA. And now, just this offseason, he has finally gone the other way and asked to be traded. And he's only given the team one destination that he wants to play for, which is the Miami Heat, who lost in the NBA Finals to the Denver Nuggets. So,
but the Heat are an incredible team. You see them. I mean,
yes.
Even as a non-sports watcher, I know that the Heat is like one of the major teams in the NBA. You see them all the time.
Absolutely. And especially the last 17 plus years, they won a championship with Dwayne Wade and Shaq in 05 or 06. I guess it would have been 06. And then a few years later, LeBron James and Chris Bosh take their talents to South Beach and go to 4 straight championships, NBA Finals, I should say, winning 2 of the 4. And then now again, they've been in the finals twice this decade, and they lost both, but they're still a great brand and franchise, and they're a destination. Players want to, when they're a free agent or when they're getting drafted, they want to go to Miami. It's a great atmosphere. It's hot. It's a beautiful city. It's a good team and a great place to live. You're also, I mean, just
in
the
Florida.
international travel. There's some, yeah. So there's that, but players want to play. They want to play in Miami, and
Yeah.
compared to Minneapolis, Milwaukee,
Sure.
Oklahoma City. In
Yeah.
Portland, like these
Yeah.
aren't places that are drawing free agents for big money contracts, right? Those
Mhm.
places have to draft players and hope that they stay. And that's what happened with Damian Lillard. He was drafted by the Blazers. He's given everything to them. They've signed him to multiple contracts to keep him around, and he's been great for the city. And he's been just a super loyal dude. But now, like I said, flipping that switch now, he wants to go to Miami. So he's still under contract. His contract is for the Blazers. They technically have the rights to trade him anywhere they want. But if he's saying he's going to him and his agent saying, like, we only want to go to Miami, and said that even they would make it difficult, maybe even by not playing for another team, if he were to be traded to them, because it's really the Blazers' decision to make as to where he goes, and what they get for him is going to be what puts that into play. If the Heat don't have enough assets to get Damian Lillard, why would Portland decide to, unless they like, hey, you did so much for us, we didn't do enough for you, we're going to put you where you want to go. But,
unlikely.
Feels
unlikely.
They're also running a business too, and if you're the
Yeah.
guy who's in charge of running that business, do you want to get less for your best player or your best asset and bring in lesser things because of a good faith situation or whatever that is, and how that all works? And now the NBA has even stepped in and said, hey, Damian Lillard and your agent, like, you can't just demand to only go to one team. You will, if you get traded to another team, you'll go there. And that's
they told him that?
The NBA sent out a memo just this week to every team. They let every team know what has happened about their investigation, their talks with Damian Lillard and his agent, what his responses were, and they kind of backtracked I didn't say I would only play for the Heat, but that, that's still the preferred destination and whatever else. But and the NBA basically said, like, if other teams and players do this, like, you signed a contract, and until that contract is over, like, we're gonna fine you if you say things like, we're only gonna go play for this place, or I'm gonna not do this, and I'm only going to play for these guys or these few teams or whatever that, their stipulations might be.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's one of the bigger things that's going on right now, is he's kind of backtracked a little bit, but now we know he only wants to go to the Heat. I mean, that's very clear. And now the decision is, do the Heat, throw enough to the Blazers to get him, or does another team say, hey, we know he doesn't want to play here now, but we have the assets to bring him in. We can figure out the rest later.
It's a real tricky situation.
Yeah, because he signed a contract with the Blazers. The Blazers have the right to trade him, right or wrong. Yeah. That's a contract he signed. He didn't do the no trade clause, which is extremely, extremely rare in basketball. Mm-hmm. And so that's another thing, like the running back situation in the NFL. How will players... This has been an issue in the NBA where players are deciding things and not the owners and teams. They're using their power, even though they signed a contract, they're locked in. They're using their power of demanding a trade, making things worse. There's a superstar player, James Harden, showed up to camp like extremely overweight, unhappy with his contract, or unhappy to be playing for the Houston Rockets at that time, and wanted to be traded. Exactly. Yeah. Wow. Just showing up not in shape, or there's a number of things making life hell if you are playing for that team, or just not being a good teammate or person or whatever it might be. So that's the next thing that's going to come up in terms of basketball contracts between the players, owners, and the NBA, similar to what we're talking about with the running backs in NFL.
Yeah, lots of changes happening, lots of rights for players, and I think I'm on their side. I love to hear that they're standing up for what they believe in and getting fair compensation, or on that regard, I did have one question. How much do you think, like, because you're talking a lot about like players want to go to Miami because it's nice there all the time, or they work in California, how much do you think the weather plays into it versus like, oh, I don't want to play for that team because it's that team?
I mean, I'm sure it's all wrapped into it, I'm sure it's all sort of part of the decision-making process, if I had to wager a guess.
Well, I think it comes into play quite a bit, but there's a big difference between Miami and then the Orlando Magic. I mean, they're further north in Florida. It's still, it's Disney World and that whole thing. It's not the glamour of Miami, but it's still like a nicer big city in Florida. But they don't have the cash that or cachet,
Sure.
that the Miami Heat do, and they're not in the same position. Whereas the Magic are more of like a younger rebuilding team. They've got some good players, but they're not quite playoff ready. Whereas the Heat have been contenders in the playoffs for the last 4 years. They have superstar players or guys, up and coming young players that still play a role that is important to the team, not just waiting for them to get good later. They're good enough now and still getting better. Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero. And the Magic don't have that same like lure that the Miami Heat do. So I do think that there is a combination, and I've never been to either city, but certainly I think the preference would be Miami over Orlando. But still, you get the idea. Like the weather thing is in there, but who the teams are does play into it a lot. I mean,
when you're considering something like the Magic versus the Heat, they're both in Florida. They're both going to have the same general like weather patterns, whether it's like the Eastern Seaboard or the Gulf. It's a little bit kind of the weather thing doesn't matter as much for like maybe say that team as it would be like, am I considering the Brewers versus the Heat versus the Magic? It's like, then you're like, oh, do I want to go to a less populated area of the country, where they might not sell as many tickets or something? But how much does that like factor in, I guess, for players? Is the question.
That's another thing is if you're a player who wants to play for a New York team, the Brooklyn Nets, the New York Knicks, you have the Knicks are a historical franchise playing in the world's greatest arena by many accounts in Madison Square Garden. But then being in New York, the weather isn't going to be great, but you have a chance to make a bunch of other money in other ways, similar to Los Angeles, but of course without the weather. But just it being a bigger city where there's so much going on, there's a lot of other opportunities and other businesses that are based out of, worldwide companies that are based out of New York and LA.
Yeah.
So going there, can increase your pocketbook outside of your player contract.
You mean like sponsorships and stuff like that, or advertisements?
Yes, exactly. Yes. So those are other reasons to go to a bigger city. Some players like the small town of Green Bay or the Tim Duncan and San Antonio Spurs, or I know Green Bay is a really weird example in sports. There's nothing really quite like them.
I mean, how many
smaller
players?
Cities, Portland, Milwaukee, San Antonio, in like Oklahoma City, Salt Lake City. These are like a lot of players like don't want to go to these places. Or if you're, a young black athlete, it's unlikely that they're going to sign a free agent deal unless they're getting way more money to go to play for Salt Lake City and the Jazz. Than somewhere else that they might feel more comfortable in. And there's like that's something that players talk about, fans talk about it, in going to these places that unless they're a contender and already have a good foundation of players. Nobody wanted to come to Milwaukee to play for the Bucks until Giannis was there. And so like those things matter. And how do you get, especially a US born player, to come to play for a city that he knows is not that cool, or thinks that and has that idea. Whereas a foreign player might come over and see things that they like about the city and not have that predetermined idea of what this city is, and as opposed to what it can be and how it can become their home, and maybe the similarities to a European city that they're more familiar with.
Also, I'm sure like the player like roster also matters a lot. Like who's going to be your coworkers.
Your coach, the owner.
Your coach,
matters a lot too.
Yeah, all of that stuff. There was a player, Jeremy Grant, on the Trailblazers. So he got traded to the Blazers, but agreed to re-sign with them this offseason. He was a big free agent a couple years ago. He was leaving the Denver Nuggets, who are a very good team already. This is before they won the title, of course. This is a couple years ago. And he was like, I want to play for a team with a black owner, or at least one of the major owners of the team is a black owner, a black front office, executives and general manager, and a black coach. Like that was what was important to him. He went to one of the worst teams in the Detroit Pistons. But like those are the things that were important to him. Is Detroit like a desirable city for him, or like is that like he kind of set that on like what kind of organization and things like that he wanted to be in? Those are the things that were important to him and to where he signed.
If the team cares about representation or not.
Yeah, they never made the playoffs. Yeah. They didn't make the playoffs. They didn't make the playoffs with him or without him. Like he was in a rebuilding team, but he got to be the star of that team also, if you want to throw that into the mix, that he was their go-to guy. And he got those things in terms of how he wanted his leadership to look like him and feel good to him. And that was what was important to Jeremy Grant.
That's fair.
That's cool. You kind of get to feel it out with each team and where you want to go. So I get where this guy's coming from with like, hey, I want to go to this team. I want to be a part of that. With all the other football execs saying, well, your contract says we could sell you to anyone, it's wild. It's wild. We don't care about what you want or what you want represented. Is
just very business-like.
Yeah, it's too business-like, I feel,
Too impersonal, perhaps.
Yeah, too corporate.
Yeah.
That's too bad. I mean, the thing is, though, they're pushing the agenda. Even if these guys are like, no right now, as long as you keep at it, like you can make changes with the stuff in all of these sports too, with football as well. Like we were talking about, like you just got to push, you got to fight for what's right, and
it'd be interesting to see how it progresses from here, with all the changes just being pushed for right now. So
very true.
A
nice shirt, Anthony. I do love Tiger Army. I meant to mention that earlier. It's been years.
They're the best.
It's been years since I've listened to them, but I saw them.
I don't know anything about them. What's Tiger Army?
They're punk. They're like
country punk. I would say one of the terms I'll use for them is punkabilly, like not rockabilly.
It's absolutely punkabilly.
But it's not just that they do. It's a 3-piece band for the most part with a stand-up bass that play punk rock, country-ish type stuff, or even they've transferred to a little bit more surf too, thrown in, which is a lot of fun. But they will also every now and then do like a really old school, slowed down country song. I mean, it's new and written by them and everything, but it's got like steel pedal guitar and really. The song "Outlaw Heart" is a great song. Got their most listens on Spotify because it's not really like a lot of their songs, but sometimes they will break out and do just a straight up old school country song. It's gorgeous. Check out Outlaw Heart. It's such a good song. Tiger Army, it's actually the band that I had tickets to in April of 2020, and of course still haven't seen them.
Tiger Army, that sucks, man. I saw them in
still waiting.
I want to say I saw them in like 2007.
Oh, that'd be
or
so awesome.
Vans Warped Tour. I was in 7th grade and like in the mosh pit and stuff, and I had all my cousin and his big friends. They're like 6 foot tall dudes all surrounding me, and I was just getting pinched in between them. But they were the protectors from everything else in the crowd because they rock out, man. They were super great.
They're so great.
So short.
I'm sure that at Warped Tour they get pretty crazy. I've never been to a Warped Tour. I think that time has passed for me, unfortunately. I don't think that's a thing. Is that even a thing? I don't even know if they're still doing it.
Still doing Warped Tour? No idea. But that band's from Berkeley, right? Or Los Angeles?
Right. I think it might be Orange County.
Yeah, maybe LA. But it was so fun to see them, and Vans Warped Tour was fun. We went a few years in a row. Saw Coheed and Cambria. I saw Paramore one year. If that was Vans Warped Tour or the other one, I can't remember, but there's tons of bands. It was super great.
Yeah.
Well, nice shirt.
I remember one of the things you wanted to talk about also with baseball is when we came back from our trip to Colorado, we saw a Giants versus
Rockies.
What was the team?
Rockies.
Yeah, we saw that. I didn't know if you wanted us to elaborate more on that, or if you had any questions.
Yeah, I felt like, I don't know if we glossed over it, but I just wanted to know how you guys, with the pitch clock is something that's new in the game, and I wanted to, games are about a half hour quicker than they have been in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's done a lot to keep fans engaged in the pace of play at a more bearable spot for maybe more casual fans or fans that are just getting into the game or
Yeah.
maybe have fallen out of it completely. But just, I don't know. I just wanted to see what you guys thought about the game, and just any other little insights that you guys might have had, or how it compared to games you had been to previously, and how you liked Coors Field, which is it's crazy now. It's become one of the older parks, but it's um, what, I don't know, around 30 years old at this point, which really isn't even that bad, but it still seems as beautiful as ever.
It was a great day when we were there. It
Yeah,
was
yeah, it
gorgeous
was really
out.
nice.
Very nice field. Very nice park as well. The layout was great, being right smack in the center of Denver.
Yes.
As far as the pitch clock and stuff, man, like I've been to my fair share of baseball games, and like it did like go by significantly faster. It felt because like I was looking at the clock from our angle, kind of on the first base side. Like the clock is right there, right next to the pitcher when you're facing him, and it's like, oh, as soon as he steps on there, it's already at 15 seconds. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, he's got to throw it in the next 3 seconds because it's just like he's got to get his pitch, he's got to go. One thing I noticed is that like a lot of people actually stayed until the end of the game, which is actually not very common from my experience.
Was
at
it a
baseball
close
games.
game?
It was a pretty close
It
game.
was pretty close, and we came back in like the eighth. Giants came forward in the eighth inning or so to take it. But yeah, like normally in my experience, I don't know, maybe it's something about Bay Area teams, but people like race home or like leave after the seventh inning stretch or whatever. But yeah, this one they actually stayed full, and it was only like what 2.5, 3 hours at the most, which is also
Yeah.
unusual. Which it was very odd. It was different. It was good. I feel like, in my opinion, I like it, but because I'm not the one who's pitching under all this pressure. But I think the pacing was helped out a lot. You know.
I haven't been to as many baseball games, but my perception of baseball games was that they would take like it was going to be like an all-day event, you know, because that's just kind of the idea that I had in my head about baseball games, and I was pretty decently surprised. It seems kind of on par with like other sporting events now. It felt like it was about the same length of time, maybe as like just going to a football game or any other type of game. And I liked the pace of it because it felt like I was always watching something. It wasn't getting bored. Which is also, I think, a perception that I had in my head about baseball is that it was like,
for many people.
yeah, that it's a you know, kind of like almost like golf. It's like almost like a take at your own pace sort of thing, which I
Yeah.
also, that idea for me about golf has also been shattered a little bit now that I've been out and done that a little bit. But yeah, I like the shot clock, and knowing, and I was very thankful that we have had these chats, and that was something I could pay attention to as well, because I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting, knowing more about what's going on,
Yeah.
to have that perception change for me, and it didn't feel like a slow game at all. Like I was actually, towards the beginning, I was kind of like, I had got up and like walked around, and then when I came back, there was like home runs and stuff that had happened while I was gone that I didn't see, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe I should plop my seat.
I feel like I
more.
used to be able to have time to walk around a little bit and do more. So there's that. And even some teams have had to, usually by the seventh inning, they've shut down beer sales and most concessions and stuff like that. But a lot of teams have brought it open later because the games aren't lasting as long.
Yeah.
Now to walk around the park, you want to do it, show up to the game like a half hour early or something like that, so you can have a chance to see the park from different places before you actually get to your seats. Because the games are only 2.5 hours now from start to finish.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have that extra 30 plus minutes to do other things or bathroom break, whatever it might be.
I basically only left my seat when it was team change, when the sides changed
between innings.
Innings. Yeah. So yeah. I also had another baseball thing I wanted to ask you about. It was from a YouTube short that I saw recently, where there was a guy getting in trouble with like umpires or something like that. It was like something illegal that they were doing, and it was like when you're running from home base to first base, there's like an area that you have to run in so that you don't interfere with like the pitcher trying to throw to first base or something like that. Do you know anything about anything like that?
Can you run the situation down for me one more time?
Yeah, so basically the idea is that like when you're at bat, you hit, and then when you're running from home base to first base, there's
Yes.
like an area of the field that you're supposed there's like a channel that you're supposed to run in so that,
Yes.
you know,
Yep.
if the or if the catcher receives the ball and then or like something and has to throw it to first base, you're not getting in the way of that happening,
Correct. Yep.
and then, you
The
know,
base
keeping
path. The
the
base.
base path.
Yep. You stay within
Yeah.
the base path.
And
There's like some ways to kind of mess with that a little bit. Like if you're a runner and
yeah,
you're running to first base, you don't see the ball, right? Your back is turned in this
of course.
situation,
Yeah.
but you can see where the first baseman is putting his glove. And if
Mm.
he's putting it out, further to one side, maybe you veer
Take
a little bit
one
towards
little
that
step.
side, and maybe you don't create any contact or anything, but just the idea that he's hearing footsteps, he doesn't see you, you see him, he's looking for
Yeah.
the ball. Just there's little gamesmanship, or we've seen players get in trouble. Alex Rodriguez for yelling things, or even a few weeks ago, I think a player hit the hand
I saw
used
that.
his hand to hit the glove to try and knock the ball out and stop a catch from happening in a very similar situation. I think it was a throw from maybe third base to first base, but
Yeah, I
running.
saw that clip. He smacks the glove. Yeah, or
Yeah.
like
Weird.
the unsportsmanlike conduct of I hate this the most in baseball. Let's say you're on first and you're running to second, and they're trying to turn a double play, so they throw to second, and then you as the base runner like purposefully slide late to trip
Absolutely.
up the guy on second so he can't throw to first.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
like,
You
let them make
slide
the play,
late. You
man.
slide away from the base to
Yeah.
try and make contact. Players used to slide cleats up. There's, I
Yeah,
don't know. Yeah. There's all sorts of stuff and gamesmanship, and
yeah,
baseball's known for, like we've talked about in a very early episode, the unwritten rules of baseball.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
there's things about that of when it's okay to slide into a player and when it's not, or how you do it without hurting them, but still making an impact on the play from them completing the throw or the catch, whatever,
Yeah.
and getting it out and things like that. So there's a lot of fun with that in baseball, I think, more so than any other sports in terms of the unwritten rules.
Yeah, and just to segue just a little bit into Dungeons and Dragons talk or RPG talk, there's a lot of things that I think about with unwritten rules, whereas like players are in charge of their own, to a sense, they're in charge of their own character, whereas like let's say I'm doing a bunch of things on my turn in combat. I do an action, I do a bonus action, I do this other thing, and it all sounds like it synergizes well. But then you realize two of those things are bonus actions, and you can't do both of them. It's kind of like you can't expect the DM to remember everything, so you kind of
Yeah.
have to be in charge of yourself. It's like a don't test the DM's knowledge to see if you could do all these things at the same time. It's like, no, be responsible, take your actions that you're allowed to take. Don't bend
Yeah.
the rules just because you want to see if you can get away with it. Bend the rules on accident because you weren't thinking about something. You
Yeah.
know, there's
If
definitely
you
that
want to
character
bend
as
the
well.
rules, talk to your DM about it. Maybe he'd be cool with it.
Yeah, maybe he wants a cinematic moment and wants you to be able to do these things. Maybe he planned this for you, but
Or
but
maybe
there's
he'll
definitely
allow it with like a roll check, like maybe you
Yeah.
want to do more than you're technically supposed to be able to on a turn, but if you succeed on a check, maybe your DM is cool with it,
Yeah,
So,
that's where I think like sports and D&D can differ a little bit. Whereas like sports, if a referee is purposefully ignoring a rule, it's real bad. It's like, no, you're clearly like siding for one team and like helping them
Yeah.
out in a significant way. However, in D&D, you're all kind of like working together and playing a game together for fun.
Yeah.
Less like professionally. And so it's like if a let's say a DM or a player wants to do a certain action, it's not allowed. The DM could say like, you know what, because of these circumstances, or because I really want to see this happen, I'll allow it. I'll
Yeah.
allow you to break the rules. I'll allow you to cast an extra spell because it's funny, and it doesn't really have an impact on the action and
Yeah.
like the monster.
And it's
or
not a
whatever.
competition at the end of the day,
Yeah, it's for
just
fun. It's to
yeah.
create memories. It's to be creative together.
Yeah.
Which
And
I think is
that sort of thing can be like extra bonds that you have with your players and your dungeon masters. Like,
yeah.
the other side of that coin is like you also knowing when to say no to your players too, because like if something is not feasible or if it would be, it would hurt the game by
Mhm.
allowing it,
Mhm.
you being able to tactfully say I don't think that that's possible can be interesting because I mean yes anding your players is a great thing, but there are some times when it's maybe less appropriate,
Mhm.
so and sometimes that can you can run into some conflicts there, but as long as it's coming from a place of positivity as well, I think that that's important, or at least there's a reason for it. It's not just because I say
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, there's a danger with like, oh, I always allow one player to break the rules because they're new to it, compared to like when I DM Michael, I never let him break a rule ever because he
Because
knows
I'm the
better.
rules guy. I
'Cause you're
know
the
the
rules
rules.
guy. Yeah,
I don't let myself break the rules.
yeah, yeah, exactly right. So there's
Yeah,
definitely that element to it as well.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
I know the
Hell
rules so
yeah.
I can break them.
yeah, if allowed. And that's one thing I like too is that the DM is kind of, yeah, he is the rules like lawyer, rules master. He like decides
Yeah.
what's possible. He can break
He's
any
the
rule he
judge.
wants to with
Yeah.
the story, with the plot line, or with, you know, just saying, oh, this happened because magic and that's the way it is now,
Yeah.
you know. Or
He's the
I don't know.
master of dungeons.
The thing is, if you say yes to your players, then you have to deal with the consequences of saying yes to letting them break rules. So,
It's true.
you know,
It's
fix it
true.
later.
You can
It's all
also
that.
say like, hey, in this circumstance, I'm gonna say yes, but my general rules call is not going to. Well, we can revisit it later, but generally, I wouldn't allow this. But for this specific circumstance, we'll say yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's not really a cool thing to do in sports and professional professional games. Hey man, because of this moment was really cool, I'm gonna let you kick that guy in the shins with your cleats.
Yeah,
Sounds great.
yeah.
It was a sick
You
headbutt.
got to be more impartial when it's a competitive thing.
Yeah.
You got to be. That's why they have refs.
And gambling on the line too. There's
Oof,
Yeah.
yeah.
I saw a clip recently of like a ref for basketball was watching some guy make a shot, and it was like showed the hoop and everything and the ball missing the hoop, and the ump in the background going, oh, like that, like making a face, and just it's like, bro, what do you mean?
yeah,
He just
careful
missed the
there.
shot, bro. What do you
Careful
mean?
there. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you just wanting to see something cool, or
Yeah.
were you did you have some stakes in this matter?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
gets a little weird.
That would be me
It's
as a
a little
ref,
tasty.
though.
Yeah.
I just want
Yeah, well,
everyone
you
to
like
make every shot.
yeah. Every time the crack of the bat happened at the Rockies game, Michael was excited. I'm like, no, dude, that was the
That
Rockies. Please
that was
stop.
I was like, I like that they're doing good.
The root for the offense, like you said.
yeah,
Yeah.
just root for the offense.
Score
Exactly
points.
right.
Score.
Then again,
score
I
runs
love
and
rooting for
points.
defense too when they do an awesome like they had an awesome double play against us at one point. I was like, that was so smooth. That was a sick catch or whatever. And I was like, yeah, can't help but appreciate the sportsmanship. which
Exactly.
is-
And
yeah.
sometimes you just have to of the just I don't know. You just respect good plays, good players,
Yeah.
and when something amazing happens, even if it's against your team, sometimes you just say that was so cool to see.
Yeah, and just like the honesty at the end of the game of just like, they kicked our butts, but they played really well.
Yeah,
And
what were we
having-
supposed to? Yeah,
Yeah, how
there's
could
nothing
we
we were gonna do. Yeah,
Yeah, not
You,
today for
you,
us.
you put it all out in the field, and that's just the way the dice rolled that
That's right.
particular time.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of a dice roll, should we get a little vibe check in here?
Why
Yeah,
not?
let's do one. I'll try this die.
I got a different one this
Please.
time.
Oh, please.
This one,
Not good.
it's hard to tell, but it's actually larger than a normal die.
Is it more in Charger?
Yeah.
Oh, nice! Wow, look at
Yeah.
holy cow! I didn't
It-
have an idea until you actually brought it
Yeah,
up.
yeah. Comparison, it's much bigger. Anyway,
I have a big one
yeah.
somewhere.
I'm gonna roll
Ooh,
this
where
one.
Put it. I have a big orange one somewhere. Oh, maybe it's in here. The dice bag of many.
Ooh wee, ooh wee.
Shake it, Michael.
My original roll was 7. I don't know if I'm gonna re-roll with this big die or not.
Let's
here it
do
is.
rerolls.
Re-rolls?
Rerolls.
There's my regular dice. Here's my big one.
Oh wow!
Oh,
Look at
yeah.
you guys.
Yeah.
Size
This is a
matters.
Mighty 9 Critical Role Mighty 9 die.
Yeah.
That's a 29, a 21 on there. What?
No, 20. No, it's not 21. It's the symbol of this D&D party from a podcast, from Critical Role, the podcast.
Oh, what?
It's their second adventuring party. It's an M and an N with a sword through it for the Mighty 9. That was
So what if you roll that?
That's a 20, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the nat 20. So I'll roll this one. I haven't rolled it in a while. So big. It's like a golf ball.
I got an 8.
I got a 7 again. Okay, it's just double 7.
It was
So I
meant to
guess-
be.
I got a
Roll doesn't matter.
17. I got
I
a
knew it.
17. I
I
knew
knew you
it.
would.
Yeah, I'm
we got the
rolling
most
hot
plugs
today.
as well. So
Yeah.
get out.
So I'll start off with the plugs. We'll start signing off for now. Thanks everyone for listening to another episode of the Athletics Check podcast, where we talk about all things RPGs and sports. Things I wanted to plug at the end here. Once again, Zebashu. That's ZEE space BASHEW. Or the animated spell book. You can also search for him on there. Great animator, love his stuff, and I think if you're into D&D, it's a really interesting resource for you for learning how to use and cast some of the spells. I've definitely used it to teach some people how to play D&D before. Also, there's another channel, The Dungeon Professor. More recently, something that I've been watching. I really like his information, especially on like world building and like geography, all that stuff that like goes into that sort of thing. And then finally,
Sorry.
Bless y'all.
Thank you. I couldn't hit the button in time.
he's allergic. He's allergic to my plugs. But the last thing I wanted to plug was the Prismatic Wasteland blog. Look him up. Just Google Prismatic Wasteland. He's actually the author of that Barkeep on the Borderlands zine that we had talked about, I think, in the last episode. But he is a really interesting D&D RPG blogger. Has a lot of really great ideas. Go check him out. And Anthony, what you got for plugs today?
For today, I'm going to do StreamYard for giving us this wonderful recording equipment or program, I should say. Tiger Army, of course. Love Tiger Army. One of my favorite bands. Still occasionally out there doing shows, and just such a fun band, so unique. And then I want to plug just the show that I'm watching right now. The Larry Sanders Show is so good. That's on Max, formerly HBO Max, formerly HBO Go, formerly HBO. Check out the Larry Sanders Show. It's from the 90s. It's great. It's about a talk show. It's like 30 Rock, but 20 years before it, and just way ahead of its time. It still is a relevant show today, and a lot of young actors, and even behind the scenes, Judd Apatow. That was he's one of the producers and writers. So if you like any of his stuff, going back to the 90s is so good. Check out the Larry Sanders Show.
Sick. Great plug. We should definitely cover a Tiger Army song sometime. If you have one in mind, let's do it.
Absolutely.
It'd be so
Absolutely.
fun.
Oh, yes.
Rock some drums on that punkabilly stuff.
Boom. I love
it. My plugs are simple. I am on Instagram at Atlassian_maps, ATTLASIAN_maps. On Instagram, I did want to plug the Avatar Legends role-playing game. I think we talked about that.
Yes.
Uses that system we were talking about, and it's great for people who are fans of the show, fans of the comic books. Great way to get into role-playing games, rolling dice around, creating characters, and bringing your favorite elements into play.
Yeah,
also have some classes that are like technology based and non-bender based, playing in different time periods like Avatar Aang's period or the 100-Year War. Of course, time period. Super cool. Can't wait to play it myself. We almost played it twice, but then things came up with scheduling, a very common RPG problem, but it seems very fun. I'm going to encourage you all to buy yourself a copy of that today. I think it started as a Kickstarter. Added on a bunch of different like elements to it throughout time. So
that's how I got into it. Yeah.
Check it out if you haven't already. Other than that, that's it from us, I think.
Yep. And don't forget to check us out at Athletics Check on YouTube. On TikTok, we'll be posting some stuff here soon. Athletics Check 101. If you have any questions you'd like to ask us, you can reach out to us at athletics101@gmail.com. And then, of course, check out the Athletics Check podcast on Discord. But with that, that'll be it for us for this episode. Thank you again so much for joining. We look forward to sharing all D&D and sports related topics next time. Catch you later, guys.
Bye.